Atlanta to start.
How's life in the big city?
Good, good.
Okay, you're live.
All right, we're live.
We're
Here we
live.
go. Now we
Good
can go.
morning, everybody. Welcome to the Trento Gold Show. Today is day 12 of the onset of the attack and the war on Israel and by Hamas. And that must be very clear as you speak with all of your friends and relatives, is this was a war on Israel. Israel was the ones who were attacked. They defended themselves, and this war is called Guardians of the War of the Wall. Guardians of the Wall. So that's what this is. That's what this war was called. Today we have, as we do every day, we've been covering this this war and covering the situation in the Middle East on a daily basis. And we bring in experts that are able to, they are subject matter experts to discuss various aspects of this war. So today we have great guests, as we always do. We have Barry Shaw, who is a senior associate for public diplomacy at the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. We also have Dan Gordon, who is a very well-known and famous Hollywood screenwriter, director, and he's also a retired IDF captain. And then we have some firsthand coverage from Alan Kornmann, who's a part of the United West, and we have firsthand coverage of an assault on him by Muslims at a Palestinian rally that took place in Orlando. So we have coverage of that. And we see that as we are in this ceasefire that was brokered by Egypt, that Israel, that we'll see what happens, but there has already been some situations and some violence that has occurred on the Temple Mount. And we also have violence that's occurred throughout the country, throughout the world. Anyone who's wearing a yarmulke is a person who may be attacked if you even look Jewish. There have been attacks. There's been an attack in Times Square, and actually one of our producers, Michelle, a friend of hers, was attacked in New York at Times Square for looking Jewish. So there is an ongoing situation because this is really a war against the Jewish people. It's also a war against Christians, anyone who's an infidel. And, they teach there, as we're going to learn more today, the Hamas and the terrorists and jihadists, they teach their children to be violent against Jews, violent against Christians. And that's really considered a good deed for them, to take stones and throw them at Jews and injure them, maim them, kill them is okay. I tend to go on as really I should introduce the host. So I'm Suzi Gold, and I'd like to introduce our host, Tom Trento.
You're going.
I was on a roll.
You were starting your typical role, which is great, but we do have other people. Mark gives her the.
That was just
aside.
yeah, but that was just an introduction. But we do have a great show, and where we do have people who have firsthand information to share with us, because what is our intention? Our intention is to share with the audience information that you will not hear in mainstream media. There's a different mantra, there's a different story going on in mainstream media, and it tends to be very anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-freedom, democracy. And they tend to have a mantra that is it's not true. So we are giving you firsthand information.
All right, and to do that, to give you the firsthand information, we go firsthand right to the belly of the beast. We're going right into Israel right now with our dear friend Barry Shaw for a live update. What? Well, we got Barry right there. Okay. A live update from Barry Shaw, who's an expert on defense security and been reporting almost every day with us. Barry, I guess there's nothing to report on. There's a ceasefire.
It's calm. It's peace. It's over.
Calm. Let's go to Tel Aviv, hit the beaches, and have a good time. Barry Shaw, how are you?
I'm good, Tom. Hi, Suzi.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. What, you want me to talk about where we are now with the ceasefire?
Yes.
All right. My opinion Israel, I don't know if Dan will agree with me, but I hope so. I think that Israel didn't win or lose. We had a job to do and we almost completed it. If there's going to be a winner of this conflict, I think it was Hamas, because they survived and also because they now command, in my opinion, the narrative on the Palestinian street. And the big loser, as he always been, has been Mahmoud Abbas. He was the one on the way to losing a Palestinian election, and he lost further support when he cancelled it. And that was a real trigger to the violence. The warring Palestinian factions always target Israel in this. 2 weeks later, the Arab street has followed Hamas and not Mahmoud Abbas. Now, I would say if the international community tried to impose in my opinion, a dead two-state solution, which has always been a three-state solution, they have to be aware that it'll be Hamas on the other side of the border to the east of Israel and not Mahmoud Abbas. And that Israel will never agree to. This two-state solution based on, which is really a three-state solution based on non-existent 67 borders. I'm going to suggest to you, Tom, that when next time you bring United West Strategic Affairs and National Security Group to Israel, you allow us to take you onto what would be the 1967 lines, and I'd like you to film and give a report on what they see from a Palestine on 1967 borders. It will scare the living daylights out of you and your followers as well. And I think that one people have to be very much aware of. I want to end on a positive note. But now that the Palestinian is weak and Hamas from Gaza is winning support of the Arab living under Abbas, there has to be a brand new paradigm to peace. And in my solution, it should be either the 6 or 7 state solution. This is something that was promoted years ago by Dr. Mordechai Kedar. I dare say Dan has heard of him. And it was based on actually the Arab Emirates. It happened in the past once we had to get rid of Arafat. And instead of his Palestinian Authority ruling over, Israel put it in the hands of the local leaders, the local mayors. And for quite a while, it was beginning to take root until, of course, the Palestinian terrorists started trying to assassinate the Palestinian mayors. But I think this could be resurrected in the sense of clearly the corrupt Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas has failed. The alternatives of the leadership is either going to be Hamas or it's going to be Marwan Barghouti, who's now serving 5 lifetime sentences for mass murder. This is where the Palestinians are right now. So, and with the Abraham Accords, it's quite possible that Israel, with the help of the United Arab Emirates and the Bahrain, who know very well how to structure a prosperous Arab situation, which is basically respecting each tribal origins there in the Middle East, but respecting them and protecting each other and working together collectively to give prosperity to their people. That model perhaps should be echoed or copied in the area that under the Palestinian Authority control. And that could be a structure where Israel, the moderate Arab states, and probably the international community will try a new factor and not go back to a 50, 60-year-old dead solution of a 2-state solution. That's my take on that. I don't know what you think about that.
That's your opening words for us. We appreciate that. Later on, we're gonna bring you back, and we want you to weigh in on Geraldo Rivera and his views the other day. So make yourself some very, very strong Turkish coffee. And but we have been the United West many times to the Green Line, the 67 lines, and looked at the absurdity of that. But our focus today is going to weigh right in on what you're saying. Moti Kadar is a very dear friend of ours. He laid out the 7 Emirates, that view. It always comes down to whether or not the Palestinians are really looking for a land, or whether or not they just want to get rid of Jews. You know, I mean, they're running around New York and Florida saying get rid of Jews here. What does it have to do with Israel? Jews go back home. We're hearing that every hour of every day now, not far from where we are right here. So we got a situation on our hands. Before we go to our special guest, Barry, give us a minute or two on the street. The ceasefire was a military recognition of a mission that ceased. What about what's going on with the unrest, rioting, and everything with the Arabs in the state of Israel?
I'm less worried about what's going on in the internal fighting between the Arabs who are trying to represent Hamas and going out trying to lynch Jews, and the Jews going after them to try and prevent it happening. I'm more optimistic now than I was a week ago. We already see we have the police that have been backed by special forces as well. And I think I mentioned on another show, you see the marked difference over here of how Israelis, both the mainstream Arabs and also the Israelis, respect and expect our police force and security forces to take action when there's rioting. I don't want to call it protests. We call it what it is, rioting, deadly rioting and destruction going on. And the police are taking over together with special forces. And I think this thing is going to die out. There've been over 1,000, almost 1,500 people arrested. Over 700 are going to be facing charges, both for violence and for racism. And this is how justice is applied in our country. And I would guarantee, Tom and Susie, give it another week or two, and you will see an Israeli example of what America should be doing in a lot of your cities and your towns who are under the same sort of racism going on over there. And we will be the example of that within another week ago. You won't even remember it happened.
Amen. Amen. That's good news. And we have a guest. We have our one of our producers, Robin, here with us. You, Suzi Gold, right here, and you, Robin. You were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th.
Yes, we were.
Did you guys storm the Capitol? Were you part of the insurrection?
Yeah, insurrection, quote unquote. You know what's so interesting? Of course, we were not a part of that insurrection. We were there to stand with our president, and also we wanted to ensure that there was an election that was honest and there was integrity, and that we were exercising our constitutional right to be there and to protest and to ask the questions of Congress. But what's really interesting is those that did storm, and I'm not saying I don't condone that anyone.
It was wrong. It was clearly wrong.
It was wrong. I don't condone that behavior. However, you know, when you think about Ashley Babbitt that was shot, and she didn't carry a weapon. There were no weapons involved, or handguns, or they didn't go in military style. And yet, Congress came out and said that they felt they were traumatized, and then they built a fence around Congress, and then they bring in the National Guard. Compare that with what's going on in Israel, where they're being attacked with bombs, and that are purposely targeting civilians and every area in Israel. And it's the United States and those within Congress that are so bravely saying, "Oh, there has to be a ceasefire." And there are those, as we'll hear shortly, that are saying, "Oh, the poor Palestinians, the poor children." Well, meanwhile, look at the dichotomy. Look at the difference, between, some people who came in and I'm not saying it was right to go into Congress, but they didn't go in for a fight. They didn't go in with weapons, as Gaza did purposely. The Hamas did, the terrorists did. So I just find that very interesting.
If you start using Western logic to figure this out, you're going to be in a swamp quicksand that never ends. But to show you the hand of God in our show, we had our next guest on a few days ago, giving an analysis of what was going on from his perspective. And then we planned this show that we're doing today for this day. We had no idea there'd be a ceasefire. And the issue, as Barry raised, is, what are we going to do now with these Palestinians? They're in Gaza. They were fighting. They're in Judea, Samaria. Do they go into Emirates? Do they go to Jordan? What 2 states, 7 states, 5 states? How do you solve the problem so you don't have these military wars that occur every few years. And that's the subject for the majority of this first hour. Second hour, 10 o'clock, we're bringing Aaron Kornman in, one of our guys, to show Alan Kornman. I can't talk to Michelle right now. Our producer, text me, Michelle. We're bringing Alan
Which
Kornman
is
in, who,
texting
as
too.
Suzi
I
Gold
think she may
said,
have
was,
something for us.
she may have something, was attacked earlier in Orlando at a Palestinian rally and called out. You're going to see this, what's going on. But the issue right now, the big idea, we like to have a core idea, big idea for each show, and then we hang everything on that. The big idea is that, well, I'll let our special guest, Mr. Dan Gordon, and Mark's going to put a slide up on the TV back here. Dan Gordon, producer, director, screenwriter, movies, books, this and that, everything. I mean, the guy is a modern day superhero, but he's a down-to-earth human being. Look at that stuff he's won. And he is an American Israeli, lived to a bunch of stuff. Go look him
There's
up.
a lot of stuff.
I got a timeline I'm looking at.
Wait a minute, we
gotta
got a bio
Yeah.
here.
Let's just bring Dan Gordon on. Dan Gordon, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning. How are you guys?
Good morning.
We're looking forward to your big idea, and it's very exciting. Why don't you share it with us?
Well, the notion is that it's really time to take the blinders off, that for whatever reason, Western Europe and the United States have been sort of in the emperor has no clothes, illusory world for the better part of a half century, saying that the solution to there were actually two conflicts. There was the Arab-Israeli conflict, which is largely over, which was a conflict between Israel and Arab states, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq at the time. Morocco had sent troops in 1948 to fight against Israel. Saudi Arabia had sent troops, and there was an Arab boycott. That conflict is largely over. The Egyptians realized it was in their interest to make peace with Israel, and peace was made. The Jordanians came to the same conclusion. The Emirates, under the Abraham Accords, have come to the same conclusion. Saudi Arabia is in the wings. Morocco has come to the same conclusion. So the Arab-Israeli conflict, in terms of the state of Israel versus Arab states, is largely over. That in fact, the exception is Lebanon. And Lebanon, the reason that that's an exception is Lebanon is controlled by a terrorist entity, which is Hezbollah. Basically, Lebanon is occupied territory, which no one ever talks about. It's occupied from within by a cancerous terrorist organization, which vetoes everything that the Lebanese, it's a part of the Lebanese government, and it controls whatever goes on in Lebanon. Essentially, and Hezbollah is the foreign operational arm of Iran. So essentially, Lebanon has become sort of an armed extension of Iranian aggressive foreign power and a vassal state of Iran. That's one conflict. The other conflict has been an ethnic civil war, which has been going on for about 130 years between the Jews of the historic land of Israel, or the Ottoman Empire province of Syria, Palestine, and the Arab residents of that same area. And it's been an ongoing ethnic civil war. And it didn't start yesterday. It didn't start at this latest round of fighting. It didn't start in 1967, and it didn't start in 1948. It literally started about 130 years ago, when the Jews began returning to our ancient homeland. And by the way, not conquering any land, but buying it. I'm sure that people of a certain generation remember blue tin cans of the Jewish National Fund, into which people put pennies and dimes and nickels, and that money from those little blue tin cans was used to buy land in Israel, the kibbutz on which I was raised, where I went to high school, where I was married, where one of my 3 sons was born. Ginegar existed on land that was bought and paid for at exorbitant prices in 1923. And that land, when we say that land was settled, it means that land was reclaimed. That land was absolute hell on earth. It was not a plant, not a weed was able to grow there. And the members of my kibbutz, the early 17 first members of that kibbutz, literally hand planted every tree in the Balfour Forest, which is a beautiful forest today that stretches on the mountains of Nazareth. The whole valley of Jezreel was an area that was bought, paid for, and then began to be reclaimed. The story of Zionism is one of the most inspirational stories in the history of the world. It's a story of environmentalism, of land reclamation, of taking land that was either swampland or desert land and making it bloom once again. And by the way, creating jobs for the Arab residents of that same place. When Tel Aviv was built as a city at just after the turn of the century, it was built on sand dunes. It attracted Arabs from as far away as Iraq, who realized, wow, the Jews are starting to build a city. There's prosperity in this backwater Ottoman province. That's where the jobs are. And many of the Palestinian refugees of today and their descendants actually are people who came in for those jobs. So that conflict has been going on for 130 years. And the panacea, the end of that conflict, was from the time of the UN decision to partition the British Palestinian mandate into 2 states, one Arab, one Jewish. That really was the birth of the 2-state solution. And Israel agreed to the partition plan. And had the Arabs agreed to the partition plan, none of these wars would have happened. Let me just say that if Israel had on its borders the Swiss and the Danes, we wouldn't have any border disputes. Israel has no voracious appetite for land. Israel's concerned with survival, which means defensible borders. But if the Danes lived on our borders, I don't think we'd have any problem. I don't think we'd even have an army. Unfortunately, the Arabs rejected the 2-state solution, and 5 Arab armies, as well as the local Arab populace, which had been fighting against the local Jewish populace for over a year before the partition plan, continued in that ethnic civil war with the aid of 5 invading armies. The conclusion of that was not a peace treaty, it was an armistice agreement. And that armistice agreement established the 67 borders of the state of Israel. And people continued to pursue the quote unquote 2-state solution, saying that if only there were 2 states, a state for the Palestinians and a state for the Jews, then the conflict would end and we would sit around a campfire and sing Kumbaya. There would be unicorns and rainbows and everything would be wonderful.
Dan, hang on one second, Dan. We put a map up of Israel. Now, your kibbutz, when you were living there, what part, where was it? Here's Nazareth right here.
So if you just go down a hair's breadth down from Nazareth, that's the valley of Jezreel, and Ginegar, my kibbutz, was just down from Nazareth. On the mountains of Nazareth, overlooking the valley of Jezreel. Our fields were in the valley of Jezreel. It's called the Lower Galilee and the Valley of Jezreel. And to anyone who wonders what our connection is to that land, open your Bible. You'll find that in the Valley of Jezreel, that's where the Philistines fought against Saul and Jonathan. That's where King David came in at the end of the battle and declared the famous line, "How the mighty have fallen." That area has nurtured Jewish culture, religion, language, spirit for the better part of 3,500 years. Nazareth, obviously, being a cradle of Christianity as well. Jesus was a Jewish boy who lived in Nazareth. I used to, as a somewhat rebellious teenager, every Saturday, I used to hitchhike from my kibbutz because the Jewish buses weren't running. I used to hitchhike from my kibbutz to Nazareth, where I could go and feel like a king and have a wonderful Arabic meal and drink arak and smoke cigarettes, and I could feel like I was Humphrey Bogart. So it was quite wonderful. At any rate, the panacea was always, if only we had a two-state solution, everything would be fine. In 2005, Israel unilaterally, in order to give peace a chance, again, people have very short memories. We talk about the quote unquote settlements as being the obstacle to a two-state solution. So Israel went into Gaza in 2005 and uprooted every single Jewish settlement. And these were people who had lived in Gaza since 1967. When people talk about the Palestinians who were being evicted after a 30-year court battle because they wouldn't pay rent, 6 families in East Jerusalem, they forget about the 10,000 Israeli Jews who were uprooted by the Israeli army. Rightly so, the government reached its decision to say we're pulling out of Gaza and all Jewish settlements will be dismantled, and they were brought out of Gaza. Prior to that, when we had the peace treaty with Egypt and we were returning the Sinai, we uprooted the Jewish settlements and Jewish cities in Sinai, which no one seems to remember. And one of those cities was called Yamit, and it was the prime minister of Israel's home. Prime Minister Begin had his retirement home in Yamit. That on his own bones, on his own flesh, he felt that uprooting. But it was done in the cause of peace because everyone said, if we just do that, we'll have peace. Well, it did work with the Egyptians because the Egyptians wanted peace. It was really simple. And it worked with the Israelis. We said, okay, land for peace. If you're willing to give us peace, we'll give you the land. We don't have a problem. We have no appetite for it. We have no appetite for territorial expansion. We'd be very content to be within the 1948 borders, live our lives, and prosper. The idea of defensible borders is not an appetite for land, it's an appetite for survival. It's an appetite to say, how do we make it from one armed conflict to the next, which is all that we can do in these armed conflicts with Hamas and Hezbollah is buy time, because we cannot behave like the Americans and the Brits in World War II. We can't go in and say there will be 500,000 German casualties compared to only 60,000 British and American civilian casualties. The world will not allow that. Our own consciences will not allow that. So the land for peace worked in Sinai. We tried the same thing in Gaza. We said, okay, we're going to go in, uproot all the settlements, and completely end the occupation of Gaza. And we are going to resurrect, stupidly, I might add, Yasser Arafat, who will come in and he will be the leader. He has the authority to be the leader of the new Palestinian state. And the policy was called Gaza First. Let's make sure that the state that's established in Gaza is a peaceful one. And if it is, it will serve as a template to what's going to be possible in the future in Judea and Samaria. Instead, after we uprooted 10,000 of our own citizens in one of the most painful operations that the Israeli army ever had to engage in, where literally you had cousins uprooting the houses of their cousins. In some cases, I understand there were even closer familial relationships. And it was emotionally wrenching. And we did it in the cause of peace.
Dan, we got a question for you. We have Gaza right here on the map, about 3 miles here, about 21 miles the distance. Of those 8 or 10,000 Jews who were living there, were they all over the whole area? Were they concentrated in certain areas? Where were they?
They were along the border. They weren't deep inside of Gaza because there was no way that they would be viable, in Gaza City or in El Arish or any place like that. So they were along the border, and they were thriving communities with cutting edge agriculture, the best hothouses in the world, which we left intact, by the way, for the Palestinians, not just leaving them the land, but the infrastructure so that they'd be able to support themselves. What happened?
Were they attacking the Arabs? Were they fighting or?
No, these were peaceful agricultural communities that not only weren't attacking the Arabs, were giving job opportunities to them. Just as you see in the West Bank today, you'll see in the West Bank there are factories and agricultural enterprises that employ Palestinian citizens under Israeli standards, with healthcare, with pension plans, with the equal wages to their Jewish counterparts. These were good paying jobs, as many administrations like to talk about. They actually were giving them good paying jobs with full health benefits. So they uprooted them. As we were leaving Gaza, the first rockets and mortars began to fall. So instead of it ushering in a utopian era of peace, it ushered in an era of rockets and later suicide bombers. People forget that in the Second Intifada, 1,000 Israelis were killed largely by Hamas, launching suicide bombing attacks inside of Israel. One of the most famous instances, to tell you how absurd the situation was a young girl who had been treated in an Israeli hospital for third-degree burns, over 60% of her body, saved by Israeli doctors who took care of her as if she were their own daughter. Later, 5-6 years later, when she was around 18, 19 years of age, Hamas strapped a suicide bomb on her and sent her back to the same hospital that treated her. To blow up as many people as possible. It was one of the most heart-wrenching incidents where we literally in Israel went, what do we have to do? What and by the way, I feel sorry for the young girl. She did not want to be a suicide bomber. Her own family said to her, look how ugly you are with your scars, you'll never be married. They cut a deal with Hamas and basically sold their daughter to become a suicide bomber. So in that reality, we left Gaza in 2005. There were elections, municipal elections, local parliamentary elections, which Hamas won. But the president of Gaza was still Arafat, Mahmoud Abbas, Arafat's protege and successor. When they won those elections, Hamas then, in 18 months, staged as bloodthirsty a coup as has ever been. Again, people have short memories. There used to be the possibility to see the footage on YouTube if you wanted to see really gory footage. They lined up their Palestinian brethren against walls and machine gunned them. They put them up onto the top of roofs, blindfolded them, and then pushed them off 4- and 5-story buildings. And by the way, there were no protests in London or New York. And I don't recall Rashida Tlaib saying a word about it. And Ilan Omar, who was a little bit too young for it, never mentions it to this day. The crocodile tears that are cried disingenuously for the people who tragically suffer at the hands of Hamas, who are occupied by Hamas and pay the price for Hamas's military adventurism. There were no tears for the people who were machine gunned by Hamas. There were no tears for the people who were pushed off the roofs, who were Fatah members. I recall as a reservist in the army, on numerous occasions, we would have people coming to one of the crossings for medical treatment whose kneecaps had been shot off, because that was the beginning of a Hamas interrogation. So in 2007, Hamas seized control of Gaza. And I'm sorry for this long-winded explanation.
It's all right. It's
without the hour, and it's important to lay the basis for. So since 2007, we're now in 2021, that is almost 15 years. I'm not good at math, but I can actually count that high. Just about 15 years now. Without anyone ever acknowledging it, there has been a Palestinian state. What are the 4 attributes? You can Google it, you can look it up anytime you want to. The 4 attributes which define what a state is, and I'm not making legalistic arguments. This is practical on the ground as well as legalistic. This is just open your eyes and look at it. The 4 attributes of a state are a defined territory, a defined population, a government whose rule is supreme in that population, and sovereignty. And sovereignty is defined as the lack of any foreign control over your actions. In other words, you are sovereign if you have the authority to do what you want to do within that territory and with that population over which you rule. By all of those definitions, there is and has been a Palestinian state, de facto, not de jure, a de facto Palestinian state for 15 years. How's it going so far?
Hey, that's a critically important point. It's 9:38 in the morning here in South Florida. We have our special guest, Dan Gordon, Hollywood screenwriter, for folks just joining with us. That's part of his career, writer, author, director, all of that cool stuff, but also spent many years in the Israeli Defense Forces and then in the reserves, only retiring recently, and laying out the big idea, a very important argument that there's a de facto, not de jure, not by law per se, but the fact of the matter is, this is what a state is. This is what's going on. And couldn't be a better time to have this discussion than right at the cusp of a ceasefire, where everyone's going, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here, Dan? Oh, wait, Mark had a question. Hang on.
Well,
Yeah.
I would just like to point out, a couple things you have on the screen, Tom. So you might want to comment on that. This is what's happened. It's the most beautiful beaches in the world, and
This
Yeah,
is in Gaza Beach.
If people understand the geography, the Gaza Strip is on the Mediterranean. I think Dan's going to talk about the natural resources of this land. The worst it's been, children continue to swim as raw sewage floods the Gaza beach. All right, let's get back to Dan Gordon. And at 10 o'clock, we have Alan Kornman coming on. Before him, we'll have Barry Shaw. But this is day 12 of us reporting day and night, day and night. So we don't have a timeline. We're going to be here as long as we need to cover the information. So Dan, all right, it's a de facto state. What's the problem?
So the blinders need to finally be taken off, and the little boy has to come out and say, oh my goodness, the emperor has no clothes. There is a two-state solution. It's been in force de facto for almost 15 years. There is a Palestinian state. It exists. It has a government. What do states have? They have a flag. They've got one. They have an anthem. They've got one. They have a government. They've got one. That government is in charge of education, of sewage, which they don't do a very good job of health ministries, which they do a terrible job of, and they have a standing army. They don't just have a standing army, they have an arsenal of offensive weapons, of rockets and missiles, larger than any Western NATO, European NATO nation, period. there is larger than an arsenal that England has, larger than an arsenal that Germany has or France. Hamas by itself has an arsenal of offensive rockets larger than any European NATO member.
Wow.
So they have a standing army, they have a government, they have all the attributes of a state. They are, in fact, a functioning de facto state. So you say, well, please give me a break. I mean, it's the most densely populated, it's an open air prison.
Yeah.
It's the most densely populated place. How could they possibly be a viable state? What are you possibly saying, Dan? This is sophistry. You're simply filibustering. Okay, good deal. How's Singapore doing as a state? Think Singapore is doing fairly well? Gaza is 2/3 the size of Singapore, with better agriculture than Singapore has. It is larger than Malta. Is Malta a viable state? It's certainly larger than Liechtenstein. There are examples of states that are exactly the size. By the way, if Greater Tel Aviv was a state, it would be roughly the size of Gaza, both in population and geography. And Tel Aviv, Greater Tel Aviv, if for whatever reason ever seceded from Israel, and you take that high-tech bubble that goes from Netanya through Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, Rishon LeZion, you don't even have to include Ashkelon. Just that high-tech bubble that goes from Tel Aviv up to Netanya. That's roughly the size of Gaza, roughly the same population, and trust me, it would be one of the most successful countries on earth. So Gaza is blessed with everything that a country could ask for. It has a mild climate. It's the same climate of Israel. It's a wonderful Mediterranean climate. Most Westerners who talk as experts about Gaza have never been in Gaza. I've been in Gaza many times before we withdrew, and then after we withdrew, I've been in Gaza as an uninvited guest. I can tell you that the agriculture in Gaza is spectacular. I'll give you, by the way, one brief story in Operation Cast Lead, 2009, 2010. I was attached to the 101st Airborne Brigade, the paratrooper brigade, as a public affairs officer, part of the military spokesperson unit. And the unit I was attached to was the 101st Airborne Brigade. And we were in a place called Al-Atatra in Gaza. And because of my advanced years and gray hair, a Palestinian farmer assumed I was the commander of the operation, much to the chagrin of the actual commander of the operation, who said, fine, take over. And he came to me and he spoke Hebrew because he had worked in Israel prior to the withdrawal from Gaza. And he said, Commander, he said, why don't you go in and kill them all? I said, who am I supposed to kill? He said, Hamas. I said, what's your problem with Hamas? They're your guys, not mine. He said, you see this field that we're standing in? I said, yeah. He said, this used to be my farm. He said, I grew the best sunflower seeds in the entire Middle East. Hamas came in, took my farm, and they grow rockets. They kicked my family off, and they used this as a rocket launching site. He said, you know that humanitarian aid that you guys send in 200 trucks a day? Hamas steals it, gives the best to their own people, takes the remainder, puts it on the black market, and sells it for 5 times its price. He said, go in and kill them all. That's an average Palestinian in Gaza living under the yoke of the Hamas regime. So Hamas is ruling a land that has a great climate. It has wonderful agriculture. It has an industrious people. The Palestinian people are a wonderful, hardworking, industrious people. They love to get their children educated. 20% of Israel's doctors are Israeli Arabs. 20% of Israeli nurses are Israeli Arabs. I think something like 80% of Israel's pharmacists are Israeli Arabs. You're talking about a people who have a thirst for education. The young people there want to go to university. They want to have careers. They're very industrious people. They know how to work. They're not afraid of hard labor. They bust their humps every day to make a living. So you have a population that wants to work. You have a climate that's great. You're on the Mediterranean, which means that you are the gateway between Europe and the entire oil-rich Emirate states. And if there were peace with Israel, you would have access to the Red Sea that would open up all the way into the Indian Ocean. God has never blessed any place geographically as much as it's blessed that part of the world. It's the land bridge between Europe and Africa. It's the crossing point between Europe and the Middle Eastern states. It could be and it should be the Singapore of the Middle East. It literally could be paradise on earth, except for one thing. Its rulers are more interested with the annihilation of the Jews than they are with the success of the Palestinians.
Cut. If I were the director, and I am, of this piece, I would cut now to a video, and we want you to watch this, Captain Dan, and share your thoughts. Roll it, Mark.
How about play?
اعمل ايدك هيك لما يجي عندكم اضربهم بوكس خلي وجهه بندوره
ان شاء الله عشان نحرر فلسطين
ان شاء الله صديقي ايه طيب على العموم يا روان انا بقول له يمسك حجر ولما يجي اليهود عنده يمسكوه وبوم
طبعا الجيران اليهوديين عادي
يطبش عليهم
لو كانوا يهود يعني جيرانه او صهاينه عادي. طيب ليش حابه تصيري شرطيه؟ ليش؟ زي مين؟
زي
عمه. مين عمه؟ احمد. هو شرطي؟ شو بيسوي طب الشرطي؟
بحبس الحرامي واللي بيعمل مشاكل
وبطخ اليهود صح؟ انت بدك تصيري زيه؟ ان شاء الله لما تكبري. لما طخ اليهود كلهم؟ كلهم؟ طيب.
All right, it was in Arabic, Dan, but you were reading it. Explain to the folks how that fits into what you're saying right now.
Well,
That's Hamas TV.
I wish with all my heart that no child had ever been hurt in any of our conflicts with Gaza. Nobody has to instruct me on the pain of what it is to lose a child. I unfortunately am a member of that club. My heart goes out to any parent whose child ever dies before them. It rips out a piece of your heart that never heals. And literally, my heart goes out to every Palestinian family that's lost a loved one, and certainly that's lost a child. But I wish that all the people who are accusing Israel of war crimes because of the suffering of the Palestinian people, and particularly Palestinian children, would realize that what Hamas engages in is nothing less than child abuse on a massive scale. If you had child welfare services and they went into the home of some crack addict that was training their kid to be a thief, to go out and murder so that they could steal to get money for dope, you would remove that child from that home in the blink of an eye, whether or not they were sharing the crack with the kid, because of the way they were abusing those children by inculcating them with a desire to murder their neighbors. And yet no one does that. So I want to go back to this notion that what you have is a de facto state. Unfortunately, it's a rogue state, and it needs to be treated like a rogue state. People, the UN included, will say the occupation hasn't ended because the absurdity. There's not one Israeli soldier anywhere in Gaza. There's not one Jew anywhere in Gaza. They'd be killed if they came in. But according to the UN, Israel still occupies Gaza. Why? Because we control their land access to Israel with the border that we have with them. We have a quarantine over their airspace, and we have a quarantine over their naval space. Why do we have such a quarantine? Because we have been killed by this government, this country, this rogue state, using rockets and missiles and suicide bombers against us. Why do I say the word quarantine? Because I'm of a certain age. And I recall when President Kennedy, of blessed memory, imposed a quarantine on the tiny island government of Cuba because the United States was afraid of attacks by rockets and missiles that were based in Cuba.
Yeah.
But I don't recall a single rocket or missile or mortar or pistol shot ever landing on the shores of the United States emanating from Cuba. I can tell you of the tens of thousands of rockets now since 2007 that have hit Israel. We imposed that quarantine for the exact same reason that the United States imposed the exact same quarantine on Cuba, except the threat for us was more real. It wasn't nuclear, but guess what? People can be killed by conventional weapons just as easily as from a nuclear weapon. And for all those who say, yes, but it's so disproportional, number one, you make me puke, because what you're basically saying is if only the Jews would be good enough to die in larger numbers, it would be a fairer fight. But the reason that it's not proportional is twofold. Number one, Israel created something called the Iron Dome, which shoots down 90% of the rockets that are fired at us. Number two, Israel has one of the best systems of self-defense of any country in the world by necessity. Every new apartment has to come with what they call a mamad, a safe room, which is a bomb shelter. When I was in reserves, I was showing, I think it was during the 2012 war or the 2009-2010 war, I was showing around a Marine captain in Sderot. And in Sderot, as you both know, every 50 meters, there is a bomb shelter. It looks like a bus station, but it's actually a bomb shelter. And every home has a bomb shelter. And this young Marine captain who was showing us around said, my God, I have not seen force protection like that since Fallujah. He said, Sderot is Fallujah without the body armor. I said, you're right. The only difference is Sderot is not manned by US Marines. We're standing in front of a kindergarten. The average 3- and 4-year-old girl has as much experience under rocket attack as a US soldier in a combat zone. So we have a quarantine over a country which is in a state of war by their choosing against us. I'm not, again, engaging in hyperbole. I'm not making accusations. I'm simply quoting from Hamas's governing charter. Their governing charter doesn't just call for the destruction of Israel, it calls for the annihilation of every Jew on earth. So their intentions toward us are very clear. There is no state that I can think of in the world, anywhere, not Putin's Russia, not mainland China, not Cuba, not whatever warlike nation you can think of. Tell me another state that has gone to war, initiated war against its neighbors 4 times in 12 years. There isn't another one. By the way, we're not the only border that Gaza has. They have a border for those who claim racism and apartheid. Are the Egyptians racist? Is Egypt an apartheid regime? Because Egypt controls the border with Gaza as well and maintains the same quarantine that we do. And by the way, when Egypt decided to deal, if you go down to the south
Right here.
there, you will
That's,
see that
that's Egypt right there. How come the Egyptians aren't opening the border and letting the Gazans come in and out? What's the deal with that?
because Egypt recognizes that Hamas is basically a different incarnation of the Muslim Brotherhood, which was a cancer inside of Egypt, and Egypt views Hamas almost as much of a threat to Egypt as it is to Israel. When Egypt went in to deal with the smuggling tunnels that went between Egypt and Gaza and were a threat to Egypt, I don't recall anyone raising any ruckus about the fact that the Egyptians came in and plowed under a Bedouin town and declared it a military area because they wanted those tunnels eradicated as well, and they control the border with their Muslim Arab brethren.
Dan,
Go to the Dan.
Israel, as we know, sends in 700, 1,000 to 1,000 truckloads of supplies, medical equipment, food, et cetera, for the Gazans. Does Egypt open their border and send supplies to Gaza for the citizens?
Egypt under President al-Sisi has played an extraordinarily constructive role in the Middle East, and certainly a constructive role vis-a-vis Israel and Gaza. Egypt gives aid to Gaza. I think they just now pledged $500 million for the reconstruction of Gaza, and I that's a nice transition point. I really would like to issue a call to action for people who are watching this to use their social networks, their contacts, and to begin to get out into the ether this notion that there already is a Palestinian state. There already is a two-state solution. Maybe there should be a third state in the West Bank. Maybe, as your other guest said, there should be 6 states in the West Bank. But the first question you have to ask is, how's the first state, Palestinian state, doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it a model that you want to duplicate, that you want to replicate? And we've just heard from the Biden administration, which has said good-naturedly, we're going to begin doing reconstruction in Gaza, and we're going to pledge X amount of money, but don't worry, it's going to be administered by the Palestine Authority. How about treating Gaza as what it is, a sovereign de facto rogue state, which must be held accountable for its actions? How about conditioning some of that aid on the demilitarization of that rogue state? How about conditioning some of that aid on international inspections to make sure that you're not hiding rocket launchers in residential areas, which is a war crime? How about saying the UN is willing to give you all the money you need to reconstruct, but we're going to send inspectors in. If we find that you're using apartment buildings as in military headquarters, and you're putting rocket launchers next to kindergartens, that aid gets cut off because you're a state and you're not homeless refugees. You're not some poor people huddled in tents. You are a state, and we're going to hold you accountable as a state. Hamas is a governing body of that state, and they need to be held to the same standard. God forbid they should be held to the same standard as Israel, but hold them at least to the same standard that you hold Iran to. Hold them to the same standard that you demand of Russia when you say Russia is invading Ukraine and Russia has taken over parts of Georgia. The international community says, well, we're going to put sanctions on Russia because that's not the proper way for one neighbor state to behave. Russia is playing patty cake compared to the Hamas-ruled state, Palestinian state of Gaza. So just in closing, I'd like to ask your viewers, get on your social networks, begin to proclaim there already is a Palestinian state. Gaza is Palestine. There is a Palestinian state. It is a rogue state. It's time to hold it accountable. You want to give it aid for humanitarian purposes? Great. treat it like the de facto country that it is, and hold it accountable and say the aid is conditioned upon you not endangering not our civilians, your own civilians.
All right, Captain Dan, hey. You got our vote on that. There's a lot in there, ladies and gentlemen, and we don't know what we're going to do with our show. We put this show together to cover the war. We may continue, we may do specials, but we will have you back. We're going to get into many of the key points you made in the subsequent show, so we'll bring you back in. But I just had a fleeting thought. Biden, the whole Biden thing's another deal. He should tell the Hamas, look, you're going to put your weapons down, you're going to demilitarize. We're going to send 100,000 US troops into Gaza to protect you against Israel. If Israel attacks, the US is going to protect you. So, but we want to be on the beach. We want our guys to be on the beach in the resorts, but they'll be ready if the Israelis come over.
Five-star hotels that they have over there.
And every soldier, every Marine, every sailor, we going, I want to serve in Gaza. I want to serve in Gaza on the beach against those evil Israelis, you know? So that's how absurd this whole thing is. We come back to this, Dan, and we'll close out this segment. We have the preamble. Where was it? Right? Nope. No, the preamble. Right, Mark? Right here. The preamble to the Constitution of the Hamas. It says Israel will exist. Oh, they're recognizing the existence and will continue to exist. So far, so good. Until, all right, we have a little until Islam, not the Muslim, not the UN, but this thing, this system called Islam will not defend itself. The word is obliterate. Look that up in the dictionary. Obliterate it, Israel, just as Islam has obliterated others before it. Closing question to you, Dan. What does the word obliterate mean?
Bend over and kiss your ass goodbye.
All right, Dan Gordon, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks,
we're going to go to Barry for a quick update, see what's going on. Which one? This one? Go ahead, Susie, all yours.
The day the enemies usurp part of Muslim land, jihad becomes the individual duty of every Muslim. In the face of the Jews, usurpation, it is compulsory that the banner of jihad be raised.
The banner of jihad. You're going to see the banner of jihad in a minute raised in the streets of the United States. Barry Shaw, you're an analyst, a researcher. How the hell do you take a rogue state like Dan just explained, who has this as their constitution, and have peace?
I agree with every word that Dan said. He's correct, and he put it very well and very succinctly. You can't. There is no way. If the United States, if the Biden administration think they're going to pump millions of dollars into a Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip and turn a leopard into a lamb, it's a waste of money. Just as it was a waste of money for the United States to give their funding to Palestinian Authority while they still had their pay-to-slay policy. You want to do that with a loser instead of with the winner, Hamas? Hamas will shortly take over the area controlled by the Palestinian Authority. And yet the Biden administration and others want to turn this into a two-state. We will go to bed with Mahmoud Abbas and wake up in the morning with Hamas. The United States, the Biden administration ought to get their head in gear and get into reality instead of progressive dreaming.
Yeah, part of the problem with the reality is the reality of the advisors in the administration to President Biden. I mean, let's bring on Alan Kornmann with Barry. You guys have met many times. Alan Kornmann is part of the United West, Barry. And we want you, in light of what's going on in the street in Israel, we want you to take a look at what's going on in the street here in America, because you guys, you Israelis, prosecuted a near perfect military operation to defend yourselves, and it pissed off a lot of Muslims here in the United States. Alan, say hello to Barry, and why don't you set up your video we're going to show, set up what it's all about, and we'll go from there.
Tom, Susie, Barry, hi. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to bring you a report from the street in Orlando, Florida on May 15th, and cities across the world. Nakba Day is celebrated, or Nikba Day is celebrated by Palestinians and their supporters. Now, Nikba is an Arabic term meaning the great catastrophe. Now, for the Palestinians, the great catastrophe are two things. One, Israel was granted statehood on May 14th, 1948 by the UN. And two, Israel's 5 Arab neighbors attacked Israel on May 15th and lost the war. That to them signifies the great catastrophe, or the Nikba. And the Palestinians, at least throughout the United States and what European countries and throughout the world, have been having Nikba rallies for decades. Now, that's why the Nikba is in reality a call for Israel's destruction, because once Israel ceases to exist, the last Nikba, or the last catastrophe, will happen. And Rasha Mubarak, who works with Rashida Tlaib, Representative Rashida Tlaib, Democrat from Michigan, she was leading this protest or rally in Orlando. And part of her messaging was that this was going to be the last Nikba. She did not want to see any Palestinian faces next year, because the last Nikba is now, which means Israel will be destroyed between May 15th and the same time next year. But I'm sorry to tell you this, Tom, but anyone calling for the destruction of Israel by metaphor or otherwise means that they dwell in a dark and evil place. Now, at this Palestinian protest in Orlando, there were 750 to 1,000 people, which is a very significant number for a small town like Orlando. Now, some of their named sponsor groups, going back to what Barry said, is that you have the Young Democrats of Orange County, the Young Democrats of Florida, the Democrat Socialists of America, and yes, this hate rally was sponsored in part by the Democrat Party. So this dark and evil place has a very firm and fertile home within the Democrat Party, which is a foundation for a lot of the problems that we're seeing, and a lot of the excellent cures to this may never come to fruition under a Democrat-led party. Now, the heart and soul of these protests are the chants. Now, with full audience participation is what makes them so unique and interesting. Now, psychologically, a group chant means that everyone is on the same page. There's safety in numbers, there's safety in thought, and there's a singular purpose and a singular thought pattern. Now, one of the most popular chants that we've seen on our visits to Israel over the years is, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." This is a popular chant saying that Palestinians will be free when the state of Israel ceases to exist, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. That is another call for the obliteration of the state of Israel. Now, it's the chants in Arabic that are far more interesting, far more chilling, because these are chants amongst themselves, for themselves, not particularly for our English-speaking consumption. Now, one of the chants that I found particularly troubling was Al-Quds Rahim Shahada Bal Yamin. This was repeated over and over. Now, Usama Dakduk and Claire Lopez helped to translate these, and I thank them dearly for bringing this, because the audio was very rough and it was spoken so quickly, but Al-Quds Rahim Shahada Bayamin means, to Jerusalem we will go to be martyred in the millions. To Jerusalem we will go to be martyred in the millions. That means that the Palestinian people will descend on Jerusalem in huge numbers to martyr themselves. That means to die in the advancement of Islam, assuring the individual a place in Jannah. So there is a large, a very compelling religious component in this. Now, at the rally, I was singled out. I was in the front row filming, documenting. I was wearing a cap, had a camera, no signs, no anything, nice and quiet, all there. A couple of people in the way back, but for all intents and purposes, by myself, bothering nobody. Rasha Mubarak called me out. She goes, she stopped the protest. She says, in our midst, we have a Zionist, a provocateur. And someone shouts out, where is this where are they? She goes, right there. And then she pointed at me. And this is 750 very angry Palestinians who hate Israel. When they hear it, the word Zionist is a trigger term, to use the Marxist idea. It's a trigger term that drives these people into that very dark and evil, insane place. So as soon as she said that, she said, cover him up, meaning me, but don't fight. She made the distinction, don't fight, but cover him up. So as soon as she said that, I was surrounded, I was shoved, knocked, elbowed, hit. I had signs put in my face. My camera was blocked, which was the main intent. And then you could either stood my ground and risk getting knocked over and hurt, or I was pushed back and I yielded my space and I was pushed back to the back part of the event. So that is my little slice of life from a NICBA rally in Orlando, Florida.
We're going to show it in a minute, but I think Mark has a comment.
Yeah, Alan, this is Mark.
Hey, Mark.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They don't talk about liberating, like free. They're talking about free of Jews, killing Jews, mass extermination of Jews. Because the statement comes directly where they've taken it from. It's Hassan al-Banna, who said, the land of Israel from the river to the sea will be completely free of Jews, eliminate Jews. And that the crowd is chanting that. And then Mubarak points to you and says, there's one of them. I mean, you know what it means. You know what she's saying, will be free, will exterminate the Jews. And now she's pointing at you. I'm surprised you weren't attacked and mugged, you know. Yeah.
And not just from the river to the sea of Israel, but around the world.
So here we are. That was in Orlando. We have in New York. We have in London. We have all over that, you know, any Jew is not safe at this point.
We got the video.
Yeah, we're gonna show Alan's piece, because it's not only the attack, but he tells the story of what's going on. It's a very, very important video to see the full picture. We playing it full screen to the people? Yeah. All right, check it out. We're off screen. Oh, okay. So I can't.
No, don't do it.
Nakba Day, May 15th, when the Palestinians mourn the creation of Israel and continue calls for her destruction. Watch this hate event in Orlando, Florida, led by Rasha Mubarak, who is the finance director for Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Democrat from Michigan.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Are you all tired of coming to demonstrations on a Nakba? No! Yes. Are we tired of coming to demonstrations when Gaza is being bombed? Yes! Have we had enough? Yes! Y'all, inshallah, this This is the last Nakba. This is the last Nakba. I don't want to see your faces.
Hey, Alan, we have to make this point. We stopped the video for a second. Tell the audience again who this person is and who she works for.
Well, Representative Rashida Tlaib, she's part of the squad with Alexio Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and Alicia Presley, who are rabid anti-Israel. They're anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, and they are the leadership, the de facto leadership of the Democrat Party. They wield a considerable amount of power, and their positions on world events and world issues cannot be underestimated.
Yeah, but who the woman leading who is she? Yeah, who is she compared in relation to Rashida Tlaib?
Well, she is the finance director. She's the past director of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. And our paths have crossed for years while she leads this Palestinian revolution. And I document it. And she's not a very good person. She's an activist, a community organizer, and very good at her job, quite frankly.
When she works for Rashida Tlaib, who's a Palestinian congresswoman from the Detroit area, who grabbed Joe Biden the other day and said, hey, shook him up, and Biden doesn't know what's going on. But this is a significant woman who has the ear of the US Congress, who now turns the crowd's attention against Alan. Check this out.
In your protest, our people will be free.
The last Nikba is a call for incitement to violence against Jews and is inspired by the Palestinian people's founding government document, the Hamas Charter. The Hamas Charter states, quote, Israel will exist and continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it has obliterated others before it.
From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free!
Will be free of Jews.
And whose land is it? It's the Palestinian land. The hell with Israel. No Israel. No more Israel. Okay?
So you want Israel obliterated?
Filthy enemy. Okay.
The slogan, From the River to the Sea, Palestine will be free, is a call for a Palestinian state in the territory where Israel exists today, between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, which is nothing more than the call for the complete destruction of Israel and the genocide of every man, woman, and child.
All right, hold on a second. All right, we have someone in the audience that's a Zionist, that's a provocateur, who has a camera that's standing in the front. So I just want people.
Where you at, man? Where's he at?
Right here. Just to cover him up, but no fighting, all right?
Is that him?
Yes, that's him.
Where are you here?
All right. So free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
All right, Alan.
Yes.
What's going through your mind right now?
I was getting jostled, elbowed, light punches, pushed, shoved, and there was nowhere to go. The camera, as you could see, was getting hit and blurred by flags. It was somewhat intimidating, and as Mark said, it easily could have turned violent. As those videos we've been seeing in New York, where Jews are getting literally assaulted and punched and beat up in New York City. The temperature for anti-Semitism and Jewish hatred has elevated in the United States to a degree that I haven't seen in decades. So it's quite chilling. Anything could have happened.
Alan, I don't understand something. Here you have this large group of people. Not all of them have signs that say, Free Palestine. Not all of them have, what do you call it, the
Keffiyeh.
scarf, the keffiyeh that they wear. But here you are with a baseball cap. Was there anything on your shirt? Was there any message on the cap? Like, what was it?
Jew. That's the message.
How did they
Jew.
know you were a
They
Jew?
They know him. They
know you.
Yeah, they know.
Yeah, Rasha knows me, but the people in the audience who were in the crowd did not. But you bring up a very, very important point, is the crowd mentality. The crowd didn't care. The crowd was against the Zionists. It didn't matter whether their degree of how much they were showing their Arabicness or how fundamentalist they were. Even the family members were all, and I very rarely use the word all because I can never know what's in an individual's heart. But in this case, at that moment, all those people around me wanted to see me stopped. Whatever I was doing, they wanted to contain my movement, contain where I was in that space. I was not free to go forward, go backwards, or to leave. And that's very scary. And when everybody there wants to do it, not one person came to my protection and said, stop this madness.
All that needed to happen, first of all, according to Florida law, you were assaulted. As soon as they touched you with anything, touched you physically against your request or allowance, they violated the law. You were assaulted. Number one, yeah, you were assaulted. Number two, all you need is one person to hit you, and then you would be in the hospital right now. But let's go to Israel, to another Zionist out there. Barry Shaw, you're watching this. Give us a minute on your thoughts, your feelings of this taking place in the number one tourist destination in the world, Orlando, Florida.
I'm trying to bring him on, Tom.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Look, I'm sorry, Alan, to hear about your experience. I want to tell you, we here in Israel have been saved by our Iron Dome missile defense system and by our bomb shelter. Do you know what we need today? We need progressive proof protective vests. As we hear them supporting this rabid Islamic terror regime with a murderous anti-Semitic ideology. Jews, I want to come on this. I'm sorry for this, Tom, but I'm going on a Mark Levine type rant because I feel very strongly about this. And I'm allowed to say it as an Israeli Jew. Probably Alan will agree with me. Jews strongly voted Democrat, and the House Democrat voted against the Iron Dome funding a few days ago. You know what the Iron Dome is? It's exclusively our defensive shield against Palestinian rockets. It's not an offensive weapon, but they did this because they want to move Israel. Are you listening to me, Jewish Democrat voters? This is what you have done with your vote. Shame on you. The Republicans wanted to give us that protection. The Democrats voted to take it away from us. Think about that, American Jews, when you come to vote in 2022 and 2024.
All right. I think there was a vote today also on the continuation of money going to Israel. And there was a whole block of Democrats. No, no, no. So we're going to find out. All right, Alan, you're in the midst of this. For people just tuning in right now, 10:25 in the morning, 5:25 in Israel right now. We have one of our United West folks, Alan Kornmann from the Orlando area, went to a Palestinian Nikba Day catastrophe, 1948, on May 15th. And we're showing from a point of view, POV, from the point of view of Alan, what it looks like to be a Jew standing against 750 to 1,000 rabid, insane, evil people. Let's continue.
Touch me. We're not about to touch you. Why are you here?
Hello, look here.
This is public land.
Yes, you're going to say I said look here and turn around. Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
Hey, look this way.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! From the river to the sea!
Out of my face.
From the river to the sea!
Out of my face. Don't touch me.
Hey, we got it. I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. All right.
Free, free Palestine! 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 From the river to the sea!
All right, everybody, you're going to face me. All right?
Are we marching?
If I can have everyone please just move.
What's interesting, you jumped right in front of Alan's camera.
Of course, yeah. Let's put it this way. Rasha Mubarak and Alan do not share hummus together. Okay?
All right, we're going to continue the program here. Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free!
Palestine will be free!
From the river to the sea!
From the river to the sea!
Inshallah, Palestine will be free!
Palestine will be free!
Couple of points. Zionist is a crime. Zionism is a crime. What is Zionism? What does Zionism mean? You guys.
Zionism is when they use the term Zionism, what I interpret that is Judaism. Being Jewish is a crime. You know, they say, you know, Zionists are those who believe in, who are part in Israel is really what, you know, if you are, Zion is Israel.
The Zion is Jerusalem in the Bible. Jerusalem is Zionist is somebody that believes Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. So if you believe that, you're evil. You're evil. Alan, any policemen around there, or what the heck was going on?
Funny you mentioned that. I getting knocked around, I called 911 twice and no police came. And
you talked to them on the phone?
On the phone twice, because there was a couple of other incidents from going from the front to the back that were a little more aggressive. So I had got on 911. I said, I'm being attacked, send the uniform over, and none showed.
That's really frightening.
What
the police weren't there. That really frightens
from our
me.
audience of one. You can stay there. Just you can talk. You're listening to all of that. You're watching it. What are your thoughts? No, I'll restate what you're saying. What were your thoughts?
It's terrifying.
Terrifying.
What I don't understand is where were the police? This is Ron DeSantis' state. Where are our police?
This is Ron DeSantis' state, who said we're not going to have this kind of craziness. Where are the police? Well, they had a permit probably there. They're in a public place. You can have a rally. You can't assault people. He was being assaulted. No cops. There are no cops around that thing.
There were no uniforms that I saw.
Wait, if you call a rally, you have to, if you have any group of people that are at any particular location, you have to get a permit to hold that rally. And then they automatically
The police come automatically, yeah.
So
whenever I held one, I had to
there was
have.
a rally in Boca. There were, I wasn't at that one yesterday, although I was told by our producer and her team that there were 15, 20 cop cars.
We're going to show it. We're going to show it in a minute.
You know, this goes right back to the whole Black Lives Matter. You go in there, the police don't want to be confrontational at all. They say they have a stay away order. They stay away. So if they're not there, they can't involve into these different groups and inadvertently hit someone, shoot someone or something. So they just stay away, and the cops are fleeing all these incidents, just like Portland. Stay away from them, let them tear it up, just back off. And that's exactly. And so when the 911 is being called into a police, they say, nope, we don't go there. We don't go there. They're having a Palestinian rally.
Is this now a no-go zone? You know, like some areas where there's just Arabs. I don't even want to say Palestinians, because a lot of these people didn't even live in that area. And a lot of it, just like Arafat, grew up and was born in Egypt. So a lot of these people are like, they have an affinity for this group for reasons that's beyond us. But
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that the United West 6 to 8 months ago had a Back the Blue rally where we were supporting law enforcement, because at the United West, we support our law enforcement, our military, and the rule of law. So I'm not beating up on the law enforcement. I think it might have been the 9/11 person on the phone might have been the problem, but luckily nothing happened. So.
Well, no, there's another element here Mark brought up. It could very well be that they've been told to avoid confrontation because these people, the rioters, I mean, they're attacking you. They're out of their mind. And as we see in footage we'll show you in a little while, with the cops right there, they're attacking Jews. So confrontation, cops beat somebody up, it gets on tape. That person wins the blue lottery. They get $5 million because they got beat up by a cop. The cop gets fired, and they're going, just let.
I'm a cop, I ain't going.
Yeah, just let it all happen. Who cares? If the guy's an idiot to be there, you know, if he gets beat up, he gets beat up. Maybe he'll learn a lesson. Forget about our First Amendment rights. During the course of the remaining part of our show after the video, we have two posters. One for a rally today. Today's, what is the 21st, Friday. We have a rally 4:30 to 6:30, pro-Israel, pro-America rally in North Palm Beach, Florida. We'll put something up to show you. It's going to be 1 million cops there. We've already dealt with that. And then Sunday afternoon in Fort Lauderdale, the Jackson
US 1 and Oakland Park Boulevard.
US 1 and Oakland Park Boulevard, 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock this coming Sunday. Not only cops, there will be undercover people at both of these places. There will be people all around, because we become a target when we take a stand and the Palestinians run by, throw things out. We've seen 1 million times. So let's get back to Alan in the middle of this mess. My God.
أيدينا على السلاح، أيدينا على الصواريخ، أيدينا على تفجير الباصات، أيدينا على العمليات الاستشهادية. خلص 7 مليون فلسطيني برا، بكفيكم تسخين، في عندكم يهود في كل مكان، يجب أن نهجم على كل يهودي متواجد في الكرة الأرضية ذبحا وقتلا بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى. من البحر إلى النهر، ولن نعترف بإسرائيل.
اللهم عليك باليهود ومن والاهم، اللهم عليك بالأمريكان ومن والاهم، اللهم احصهم عددا واقتلهم بددا ولا تغادر منهم أحدا.
وبدنا إياكم يا أهل القدس بالسكاكين
مع برقام اليهود كلها هي تقف على العرق من هان.
أما نحن هنا في غزة فلن يلقوا منا إلا البارود والنار، لن يجدوا منا إلا الشهادة، لن يجدوا منا إلا الموت والقتل.
Well done, Alan.
Alan, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Good expose. This is scary stuff.
Very scary
know?
stuff. Because they're here, you
great
know, like
job,
it's not
Alan.
like just a war over there, but that we are at risk everywhere in the
Here
world.
in Florida?
Here in Florida and everywhere that there is a Jew or a Christian, because it says in the Quran, hide behind a tree and wait until the Jew comes and stab him in the back and kill the Christian, kill the Jew. And this is everywhere. And that's what this is all about. This isn't about land. Don't believe that. It's not about land. It's not about any piece of territory. The history is insignificant in terms of recent history. This is a war against it's an ideology that we're up against. Is the Arab, or I should say, it's the terrorist jihadist mentality. It's an ideology that is of hate and of destruction. That's what they believe, and that's how they live their life. And we saw just a clip of what they teach their children. Who teaches their children to take a rock and smash a head and kill and shoot, grow up to be a policeman so you could shoot a Jew? I mean, what kind of mentality is this?
When someone says they want to kill you,
Believe them. Believe them. If they say they want to kill you, believe them.
Yep, and these same people are doing the Christian persecution in Nigeria and elsewhere around the world at phenomenal numbers, and yet the church is silent. Evangelicals are speaking up, but they need a louder voice, because first the Jews, then the Christians.
Well, yeah, I think we're in the mix now. Let's play the video from Manhattan. We got this.
This is intense.
Robin, you got it earlier. This was in New York. And well, this is a pretty good quality, this one. And then we'll go from New York to the Tony town of Boca Raton, Florida. But in context, folks, it's 10:38 in the morning, Friday the 21st. Alan Kornman, the last one you got was Manhattan.
New York normal.
Yeah.
New York.
And we're going to go from Gaza, which we've seen the fighting in the streets in Israel. Then Orlando, where Alan got attacked. Now we're going to New York, where even with cops right there, the Muslims are attacking. Here, check this out, wherever it is.
They're also saying right now, I was just on I-24, anti-Semitic incidents spike amid Israel-Hamas conflict. So
yeah, they're
this
very,
is all
very
over the
angry.
world.
What's good that we usually are doing a radio show and we have to read the subtitles. We don't have to now. It's playing on the TV when they're speaking in Arabic. The new normal in New York City. Check this out.
You want to kill kids, right? Pussy nigga. You want to kill kids, right? You got to support that shit, right? What, nigga? What? Can you right? Hey, back up.
Attacking them. Cop rolls over the fence.
We're getting away from this.
Jewish guy standing there with a kippah on, and they just come over in front
It
of
looks like
the
he's having a
cops.
cup of coffee.
In front. Now let's go to Boca Raton, Florida, where there's a very upscale shopping area called Meisner Park. last night, probably 400 or 500 of these folks took over the park. And we got a lot of footage while it was going on. They marched through, they went on all the property, and they all put their butts up in the air, did their prayer thing, claiming the ground is what they were doing. Check this video out as they enter Meisner Park. Look for an American flag. Tell me when you see the first American flag. They're calling for an annihilation of a country, walking down
Jews,
this.
Tom, from the river to the sea is annihilation of Jews, not the country. Okay?
Walking down the streets of Boca Raton. We're not surprised. Alan, your closing thoughts.
And we still have Barry on too.
Yeah, we'll.
Do we want to show the Geraldo nonsense?
No, we'll do that. We'll do the Geraldo thing another day. Let's get to Barry first, then we'll get Alan's closing thoughts. Barry, you're watching Orlando, New York, and Florida. Orlando, New York, and then South Florida. Your observations, Barry Shaw, on what's taking place all over the world, but right now here in the United States of America.
I don't know whether you've heard it this time round, but I remember you heard it some years ago, the cry of Kaiba Kaiba al Yahud, which the translation is Kaiba Kaiba, Jews remember. And this was celebrating Muhammad's victory over the Jews of Medina, which he celebrated by beheading 800 Jews, men and boys, in the town square. This cry was being heard, if not in America, it was heard over the weekend in Europe. If you don't believe that this conflict between the Palestinians and Israel is not over land, because as your guest earlier said, we gave land. Every time we gave land for peace, usually with some of the Arabs, we get peace. But with the Palestinians, no. Your guest spoke about giving Gaza. We brought Yasser Arafat to give him a have peace over there. He said he was going to give us peace of the brain. He gave us peace of the grave. I know this because I became the founder of the Netanya Terror Victims Organization. And I wrote a book about it, Tom, about 6 years ago, called Fighting Hamas, BDS, and Anti-Semitism. Then people didn't know what I was talking about. And the first sentence in this book says, when an anti-Israel obsession, this is what they have, is linked to Jew hatred, this inevitably must explode into violence and acts of terrorism. You've seen this with going on with Hamas against us, you're seeing it going on in Europe, and you're seeing it being played out in America. It's not enough that they hate Israel, they go out and attack Jews. And again, I implore all your Jewish voters, next time round, 2022, you have been the ones who voted Democrat that put these people into the House and into power. You have the power to vote them out, because this is only going to get worse.
Barry Shaw, we appreciate everything you're doing in Israel. Isn't he amazing?
Thank you, Barry.
His reports.
Yeah.
I think we're going to continue our shows at least for next week to do a wrap up. So we will see you next week. Alan, you hang in there. We'll see you next week, Barry. We appreciate everything you're doing there. Anything breaks over the weekend, let us know. We'll run to the studio. But it's
all over good.
Yeah, it's all over. You have a wonderful Sabbath, and enjoy the evening. Take care, you and your lovely family. And
so with your permission, I would like to thank you and Susie for all you're doing. I only wish there was more media, whether it's online media or whatever, doing the astounding work that you guys are doing over there. And I want to tell you from Israel, it is very much appreciated. And I help put out the stuff you have as well, because a lot more people need to hear and see your contribution. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank
We
you.
know
Yeah.
nobody's doing what we're doing,
Yeah.
and it's full of content and facts and information. And I'm getting text here
And
from
subject experts as like yourself. So
this is, I think, Dick Manasiri here. Alan, may we all be as brave as Alan. Absolutely.
that's right. Yeah.
You know, or as stupid as Alan. How about that? You know, hey, let me
No,
go
he's
walk
brave.
in the middle. Let me
He's
go walk.
brave.
There's a bunch of lions ripping food apart. Let me
No
go
wonder
walk.
the cops didn't go in. That was stupid, Alan.
Let me go in there and.
That was.
But this is the kind of stuff that we have done for years. Usually we have a few other people and a few other cameras, you know, but Alan went solo on this one. Got to give him credit. Alan, give us
Great footage.
It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Give us a closing thought. I mean, he exposed this insanity. Look, who was it the other day was saying it's demonic? But I think it was Pat Boone saying that this Islamic mindset like this is from hell. It's demonic. Give us a closing thought, then we have a little video. How long is that little?
It's about 30 seconds.
We'll play that. Then we're going to close in a special way on this Shabbos here. Alan, your closing thought.
Yeah, following up on what Barry was saying is that the Democrat Party has, through Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and the squad, they are pushing for Israel not to be rearmed. They are doing their part for the last Nikba. They are doing their part to, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, but they're doing it within the halls legally through our government. And that's what they need to be stopped. And the only people that can stop that or have a big influence are the Jewish Democrats. So whatever happens, it's on your shoulders. And I hope you wake up, because I'm not seeing a sign of it. And thank you for all the content that y'all have been putting out, you and Susie and Mark. Excellent show, and educating people by the thousands in a much needed fashion. So great work,
Thank
guys.
you, Alan.
Thank you. Susie's got a short little piece. I guess they made it to us. You just set it up. Well, what is it? I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so this is, as we know, it's Friday, which is for the Jewish people. It's right before Shabbat, which is our day of rest. So, and we spend 6 days laboring, and one day is a day for God. So this is a little clip from the IDF honoring the incoming Shabbat.
Hi everyone, we're Coursera and we're wishing you a relaxing weekend and
אנחנו חיילי פלס"ר 401.
הבקשיות של משט אשדוד מאחלות לכם.
אנחנו מפקדי גדוד שקד של חטיבת גבעתי.
אנחנו בחלק קצינים של חטיבת גולני.
לוחמי חטיבת חילוץ והצלה מאחלים לכם.
אנחנו חיילי גדוד שמשון. רוצים לאחל לכולם.
שבת שלום!
שבת שלום!
שבת
שלום!
שבת
שלום!
שלום!
שבת שלום!
Shabbat shalom. That's pretty cool.
From the IDF.
They're kids.
Yeah.
They're kids, but they're well trained, and they're committed to saving their country.
And men and women serve. Girls serve.
We're gonna close something a little differently. You got yours all set up?
Yes,
18?
I do.
This is at its base, this is a theological battle. You have the system of Islam, which says that the Jews dropped the ball. They didn't bring truth to the world. And then so God gave the task to the Christians. They dropped the ball. And then the final prophet was Muhammad. And that is the final truth. And therefore, Jews and Christians have to get in line and follow Muhammad, the prophet. They usually give you 3 options. Convert, submit, or what?
Die.
Yeah, convert, submit, or die. So the call from Islam is, we invite you to Islam. If you say, nah, not interested, okay, then you have to submit to Islam. Why? Because it's also a state. It's not just a theology, it's a state. And you can't have someone who is a traitor to the state, so you have to submit. Well, I don't want to convert, I don't want to submit. Well, then you have to die. You have to die because we can't have people interfering with the state. This is nothing new. Islam's 1400 years ago, but the theologies, the religious systems against Judaism, against the Hebrews, against Islam goes back 4,000 years. The Jews have been fighting this battle. So we're going to present a little message to the Islamic world today, written about 2,500, 3,000 years ago in the Book of Palms, as our president
Right.
says, the Book of Palms. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, when that was how it was in Psalms, but he couldn't, I guess he was reading it off a teleprompter and he said palms.
Joe Biden says, I'm going to read from the Book of Palms, from the Book of Palm Trees. It's the Book of Psalms. And if you want to follow along, it's chapter 18. A little long, maybe if you're here for a half hour or so. But you want to start?
Sure. So it's
Yeah.
we also
Go
say
about 10 verses, then I'll go, then you go, then I'll go, then you go.
okay. So it's Psalms chapter 18. For the conductor of the servants of the Lord of David, who spoke to the Lord the words of this song on the day that the Lord saved him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. And he said, I love you, O Lord, my strength, O Lord, my rock and my fortress and my rescuer, my God, my rock. I will take refuge in him, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my refuge. With praise I call to the Lord, and from my enemies I will be saved. Bands of death have encompassed me, and streams of scoundrels would affright me. Bands of the nether world have surrounded me. The snares of death confronted me. When I am in distress, I call upon the Lord. Yes, I cry out to my Lord. Out of his temple, he hears my voice, and my cry comes before him in his ears. The earth shook and quaked. The foundations of the mountains did tremble, and they were shaken when he was angered. Smoke went up his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth did devour. Coals flamed forth from him, and he bent the heavens, and he came down, and thick darkness was under his feet.
All I'm going to say at this point, I'm going to let you read this, this is David, who became the king of Israel. And he was a warrior, and he wrote the Psalms and poetry, but with history in it and reality. And he's sharing about the enemies coming around him, but the Lord, his God, his salvation in the midst of war. So that's what this is about. And this is a message today in the midst of war, particularly to Jewish people. The rock of salvation, God is there. Just you continue. It just sounds beautiful.
And he rode on a cherub and did fly. He swooped on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his hiding place about him as his booth, the darkness of waters, thick clouds of the skies. From the brightness before him, his thick cloud passed, hail and coals of fire. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High gave forth his voice with hail and coals of fire. And he sent out arrows, and he scattered them. He shot lightning, and he discomfited them. And the depths of the water appeared. The foundations of the world were laid bare by your rebuke, O Lord, by the blast of the breath of your nostrils. He sent forth from on high, and he took me. He drew me out of many waters. He delivered me from the mighty enemy and from those that hated me, for they were too powerful for me. They confronted me on the day of my calamity, but the Lord was a support to me, and he brought me forth into a wide space. He delivered me because he took delight in me. The Lord rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands, he recompensed me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not wickedly departed from the commandments of my God. For all his ordinances were before me, and his statutes I will not remove from myself. And I was single-hearted with him, and I kept myself from iniquity. And the Lord has recompassed me according to the righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands before his eyes. With a kind one, you show yourself kind. With a sincere man, you show yourself sincere. With a pure one, you show yourself pure, but with a crooked one, you deal crookedly. For you deliver a humble people, and you humble haughty eyes. For you light my lamp, the Lord my God does light my darkness. For by you I run upon a troop, and by my God I scale a wall. He is the God whose way is perfect. The word of the Lord is refined. He is a shield to all who trust in him. For who is God save the Lord? And who is a rock save our God? The God is he who girds me with strength, and he makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like hinds and sets me upon my high places. He trains my hands for war so that a copper bow is bent by my arms. You have given me the shield of your salvation. Your right hand has supported me, and you have treated me with great humility. You have enlarged my steps beneath me, and my ankles have not slipped. I have pursued my enemies and overtaken them, never turning back until they were consumed. I have crushed them so that they cannot rise. Yea, they are fallen under my feet. For you have girded me with strength for the battle. You have subdued me under me, those that rose up against me. And of my enemies you have given me the back of their necks, those that hate me, that I may cut them off. They pray, but no one saves them, even to the Lord, but he answered them not. Then I ground them as dust before the wind, as the mud in the streets I did pour them. You allowed me to escape from the contenders of the people. You shall make me the head over nations. May a people that I do not know serve me. As soon as they hear, they shall obey me. Foreigners shall lie to me. Foreigners shall wither, and they shall fear their imprisonments. The Lord lives, and blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God of my salvation. The God who grants me vengeance and destroys peoples instead of me, who delivers me from my enemies, even above those that rise against me. You have lifted me. From the violent man you deliver me. Therefore I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the nations, and to your name I will sing praises. He gives great salvations to his king, and he performs kindness to his anointed, to David and to his seed forever.
Amen and amen. Very, very
Amen.
nice. And on that note, we will end our show, and we'll see you Monday.
Monday.
See you on Monday.
Have a good